There is a good chance you have Viking blood, and the proof has been hiding in your own name your whole life. Not in a saga, not in a museum. In the name you sign on a check, the name your family has carried for 1,000 years without ever noticing what it was telling you. But here is the part nobody says out loud. Most of the surnames people swear are Viking are not Viking at all. And some of the most ordinary, overlooked names in Britain and Ireland are carrying Old Norse straight from the deck of a long ship. By the end of this, you are going to know which list your name is on, and the answer is going to surprise you, because the real mark of the Vikings is not where anyone has been taught to look for it. Let me kill the biggest myth first, because it is the one that trips up almost everyone, and the comment section will bring it up if I do not. The myth is that any surname ending in son means you are a Viking. Johnson, Robson, Thompson, Wilson. People see that ending. They think son of. They think Norse patronymic. They think longships. It feels right. It is mostly wrong. The truth is that the son ending became the common English way of building a surname long after the Vikings, all across the country, in places no Norse foot ever trod. Most son names are simply English. A Johnson is the son of John, and John came into England with Christianity, not with Odin. So if your whole claim to Viking blood is a name ending in son, I have to be the one to tell you that ending alone proves nothing. The real Norse names are stranger, older, and far easier to miss, and once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Here is the pattern. The Vikings did not leave their mark in a suffix. They left it in their gods, their words, and their personal names, buried inside surnames that look completely ordinary until you crack them open. So let us crack them open, one by one, and you watch for yours. Start with the god himself. Thor. If your surname begins with Thur or Thor, you may be carrying the name of the thunder god 1,000 years after your family forgot they were saying it. Thurston, from Thorstein, Thor's stone. Thurgood, from a name meaning Thor is good. Thorburn, from Thorbjorn, Thor bear. These are not rare exotic names. They are quiet surnames sitting in phone books all over England, and every one of them is a small altar to a Norse god that your ancestors carried across the North Sea. If your name starts with that sound, say it in the comments now, because you are wearing Thor's name, and you probably never knew it. And if this is already changing how you hear your own surname, subscribe to Blame Your Ancestors, because the next set of names is even better hidden. Now, the war names, because these people were not gentle. Gun, from the Old Norse gunner, which simply means war. It is one of the shortest surnames in Britain, and it means battle, and in the far north of Scotland, in Caithness, the Guns became an entire clan that traces its descent to Norse settlers. If you are a gun, your name is a weapon. Then there is Orm, from Ormar, the Norse word for serpent or dragon, the very thing they carved onto the prows of their ships. A family called Orm, or Ormerod, or anything with that root, is carrying the dragon. And the raven, Odin's own bird, the banner the Viking armies marched under. The surname Raven, common across eastern England, comes straight from the Old Norse Hrafn. If your name is Raven, your ancestors flew Odin's bird over a battlefield. Keep watching, because this next group is the one that catches people completely off guard. The everyday names. Because the Vikings did not only leave gods and war, they left plain words that became plain names. Story and store, from store, meaning big, the large man of the village. Gamble, which sounds like a card table but comes from gamal, the Norse word for old. Kur and Kar, which trace to the Old Norse Kar, the marsh, the family that lived by the wetland. Crook, not a criminal but crocker, someone who lived by a bend in the river. Holt, from the Norse for a small wood. These are some of the most ordinary surnames in the English-speaking world, and every one of them can be a fossil of Old Norse. If yours is on that list, drop it below, because half the people watching are about to realize the most boring name in their family is the most Viking thing about them. And it reaches further than most people ever expect, because the Norse did not only settle England. Look at Ireland. The Vikings founded Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, Limerick, and Cork. They were not passing through. They built those cities, and their blood is in the surnames. Doyle, one of the most common names in Ireland, comes from O Dubgail, the dark foreigner, and the foreigner it names is the Viking. Names like McManus and Reynolds trace back to the Norse Magnus and Ragnall. Cotter, Broderick, Higgins, Sugru, all carry Norse roots along the Irish coast. So if you are Irish and you always assumed the Vikings were just raiders who left nothing behind, stay with me, because your own surname may be the very thing they left, and the DNA is about to prove how deep it went. Because this is where names stop being the end of the story and the blood takes over. And this is where the real surprise lives, the one that separates the truth from the myth, and it comes from the largest study of Viking DNA ever done. In 2020, an international team led out of Cambridge and Copenhagen published, in the journal Nature, the results of sequencing more than 400 Viking skeletons from across Europe. 6 years of work. The largest analysis of its kind ever attempted. And what it found demolished the picture in everyone's head. The first thing it killed was the image of the tall blonde Viking. Many of them, the DNA showed, had brown hair, dark eyes. The Viking Age was not a room full of golden-haired giants. It was a mix, because Scandinavia itself had been taking in people from southern and eastern Europe for centuries. But the second finding is the one that changes everything about your name. When the researchers looked at Viking graves in the British Isles, at skeletons buried with Viking swords, in full Viking ritual, under Viking mounds, some of those bodies were not genetically Scandinavian at all. On Orkney, 2 men were buried as Vikings, with the weapons, with the right, with everything. And their DNA matched the native people of Scotland and Ireland. They may have been among the last of the Picts. They were not born in Norway. They became Vikings. Sit with that, because it turns the whole question inside out. Being a Viking was not only something you were born as, it was something you could join. It was a trade, a way of life, an identity that local people took on, marrying in, sailing out, taking the name and the gods and the whole world of it. Which means the Viking legacy in your blood does not have to come from a Scandinavian raider at all. It can come from a Scottish islander or an Irish coastal family who became part of that world so completely that they were buried under a Norse sword. The name and the blood were never a straight line back to a single blonde invader. They were a mixing, a joining, 1,000 years of people becoming something new. And the DNA shows exactly where that mixing settled deepest. Go to Orkney and Shetland, the islands off the north of Scotland, and you find the most Norse-influenced population in all of Britain and Ireland. So thoroughly Norse that scientists run entire genetic health studies there, on a population still carrying the founder ancestry of the Scandinavian settlers who came and never left. The place names are Norse. The surnames are Norse. The blood is Norse. If your family comes from Orkney, from Shetland, from Caithness, from the Hebrides, you are standing at the very center of the Viking bloodline in these islands, and you should say so, because you are the closest thing to a direct line the map has. And if that is you, subscribe, because this is the channel that reads those lines for a living. So let me tell you how to actually read your own name, because now you have the key. Forget the son ending. It is a red herring on its own. Instead, look for the god, the Thor and Thur names. Look for the war words, the guns and the orms and the ravens. Look for the Norse everyday words hiding as dull surnames, the stories and gambles and cars. Look for the Irish coast names born out of Dublin and Waterford. And look at where your family is actually from, because a Norse name from Yorkshire, from the East Midlands, from the Scottish Islands, from an old Irish Viking port, is a name standing exactly where the longships landed. When the name and the map agree, you are not guessing anymore. But here is the honest part, the part the slop channels will never tell you, because it does not sell a DNA kit as neatly. A Norse surname is not a certificate. Names travel. They get adopted, married in, handed down through families who never carried a drop of Scandinavian blood, exactly like those Picts on Orkney who became Vikings without being born one. And blood travels too, so you can carry Viking ancestry with a completely English or Irish name and never know it. The name is not proof. The name is a clue. It is the thread that tells you where to start pulling. The DNA is what finishes the story, the name begins. And that is exactly why this is worth doing, rather than a reason to walk away from it. Because most people go their whole lives never once asking what their own name is made of. They inherit a sound. They sign it 1,000,000 times, and they never learn that it began as a Norse word for a serpent, or a marsh, or a god of thunder, on the tongue of someone who crossed an open sea in an open boat. You do not have to take the story on faith. You can test it. The name gives you the first half. It tells you where to dig, which coast to look at, which islands, which century. And when you take that clue and you put a real test behind it, you either confirm a 1,000-year-old thread or you find a stranger, better story than the one your family thought it had. Either way, you stop being someone who just carries a name, and you become someone who knows what it means. So here is the only question that matters tonight. When you say your own surname out loud, do you actually know what it is made of? Or have you been carrying a Norse word for 1,000 years and calling it ordinary? Tell me. If it starts with Thor or Thur, if it is a gun or an orm or a raven, if it is one of those dull little Norse words like story or gamble or car, if it is a Doyle or a Reynolds off the old Irish Viking coast, say it, and tell me the county it comes from. And if your people are from Orkney, from Shetland, from the islands where the Norse never really left, say that loudest of all, because you are the closest thing this story has to a straight line home. Subscribe to Blame Your Ancestors. Every week we go deeper into the names and the blood people carry without ever knowing what they survived. The next bloodline is already waiting.